2026 NFL Draft is just under 3 weeks away. Let's talk about what the Cincinnati Bengals need the most, what the best case scenario is for picks 1 through 9, the worst case scenario for picks 1 through 9, and what the general consensus is right now for picks 1 through 9. All that and more on today's episode of Bengals Daily, part of the Fan Arch Podcast Network. My name is Dave Olson, and I'll be happy to walk you through all of that just around the corner. Let's talk a little bit, though, about a fun fact here. April 6th is, of course, the beginning of baseball season here in Cincinnati, the opening day happening just a few days ago. Here's a fun fact. The Reds are the only team in Major League Baseball guaranteed a home opener every single year. They've done it since 1900, with only 3 exceptions over 125 years. That's because Cincinnati is home to the first professional baseball team in American history, the 1869 Red Stockings. And the league has honored that legacy ever since. So there you go. Fun fact to start off your day. So let's talk a little bit about the Cincinnati Bengals. A little less history of the NFL team just down the street on the banks here in Cincinnati. Let's talk about what the Bengals need the most in the 2026 NFL Draft. We have talked plenty about free agency, what the Bengals have done, what they haven't done, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and everything in between. And the talking heads around the world have discussed the same. I think there are a few ways to look at this, where you're looking at truly what position might impact the play on field the most this season, and that is who the Bengals should swing for. The succession planning type of positional pick, where you're sort of solid, but got some contracts coming up. You certainly could use some help, but you got some contracts coming up around the corner, and maybe you want to start to fill those gaps now. That's certainly one way to look at this as well. And also the Bengals have made some moves in a couple of positions and genuinely just need some help. So let me just say this. I'll address the headline at the bottom. Regardless of where the Bengals go in round 1, rounds 1 through 4 feel like they all have to count. Bengals don't have a 5th round pick as of right now this year. So rounds 1 through 4 really feel like they really need to count, as they do every year. But the Bengals have been playing this type of offseason football where you go into the draft with needs and you're relying on rookies to fill those needs, and it felt that way last year, and the rookies didn't quite pan out, so you're feeling pretty similar this year, though the Bengals have made some big swings in free agency here this offseason that they didn't make in 2025. So I think linebacker still feels like one of the most urgent needs in my mind. Logan Wilson obviously leaving the team, now retired. Really, the glaring question is, can Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter take a step? We talked this week about how Zach Taylor has expressed confidence in both of those two players. Saw some improvement from those two in the last half of the season in 2025. I mentioned my own personal anecdote, my own personal note was that I think the opponents towards the end of the season weren't quite as strong. I do think that Knight and Carter did take some steps. I mean, you're talking about rookies playing against NFL-level opponents. So there has to be that caveat. You can't expect them to waltz in day one and be these perfect players, but that's how the Bengals drafted them, let's be honest. And that's how the Bengals are going to be drafting players early in this draft. The Bengals are drafting rookies to come in and make an impact day one, because the Bengals haven't filled other positions on the field with free agents that are veterans that we know can make differences. So it's not fair to Knight or Carter, but they were drafted and expected to play at a high level right away. And they got better, but I still think that there's a need at linebacker. We'll talk about the interior defensive line, but I'll mention it here. The Bengals gave up the most rushing yards in the league in 2025, dead last. Almost the most yards per carry. I think 0.1 yards per carry behind the Giants, but the Giants had, I think, 5 less carries against them and like 20 less yards. I'm not going to do all the math, but The Bengals were the worst rush defense in the NFL last year. And the linebacker core was just one of the worst in the league last year. Now, the question is that because the defensive line was so bad that ball carriers and passes were making their way to that second tier of the defense more often? Certainly could be. Were safety so bad that they couldn't control the defense, call out what they were seeing, and that made life harder for the linebackers? Certainly could be. But the fact of the matter is you had two players who were near worst in the league at their positions through half of the season and only slightly better than worst in the league at their positions by the end of the year. So they did make strides. Whether or not the Bengals prioritize linebacker in the draft and after the draft and free agency will ultimately tell us how many of Zach Taylor's comments were coach speak and just telling us, yeah, we trust these guys, but really they realize they need a linebacker, versus actually truly believing it. And I do think to an extent the coaches do believe there's talent there. But all that to say, our second tier of defense is pretty squishy for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think the linebacker is a really important need. I think there's some great prospects. We talked about Sonny Styles in our previous episode. I think that's a great option should Styles fall to the Bengals. I think for me, and there's a reason I'm sitting in my basement and not up in Cincinnati, for me, that's the type of pick where I'm sprinting up to the podium if Styles is still there at 10, just because I disliked what I saw enough from the linebackers last year. But again, maybe some of the additions in free agency make the linebackers' life a little bit easier. Anyway, let's move on. Outside of linebacker, I think cornerback could be a sneaky need. Of course, you have DJ Turner and Dax Hill. I think those two are great. I think DJ Turner is one of the best cornerbacks in the league. I think Dax Hill has come into his own. He is serviceable. Lost Cam Taylor-Britt. How much of a loss is that? I'm not sure. Such an unfortunate run of luck with the Bengals for Cam Taylor-Britt. Had a great first season and then, man, really just became a headache for us to watch, didn't he? I think there's some talent in there somewhere. I think this is a change of scenery needed type moment for Cam Taylor-Britt. And then Tyson Anderson also gone. Tyson Anderson, a rotational player, but safety or cornerback depth rather gone. Jasir Taylor did get added. We mentioned that's more of a Band-Aid type of move for the Bengals, not a long-term solution. And we're talking about 2027 free agents in DJ Turner and Dax Hill. And so cornerback could be the type of position where the Bengals say, all right, we have Turner and Hill, great. We also have DJ Ivey, Jalen Kimber, Braylon Lux, Josh Newton. I don't know if I said Jalen Davis, but I'll say it again. Jalen Davis. Those are your cornerback threes through whatevers. Cornerback, still a need for the Bengals. There's some great options in round 2. I think Pons has been brought up, but also some amazing options in round 1. Could, though, signal that the Bengals are only interested in signing one of the two between Turner and Hill, if that's the direction they go. I would love it to be Turner if that were the case. DJ Turner, I think, has earned his extension and then some. I'll move on here. I think we got some cool things to talk about later in this show. Interior defensive line, for the same reasons we talked about linebacker, still busted. Most rushing yards in the league allowed last year. Chris Jenkins, poorly rated. McKinley Jackson, okay, but still below average. You add Jonathan Allen, rental for a couple of years. Can he reignite some of that early career flame? Maybe. You need, 3, 4, 5 years of confidence in that interior defensive line, though. So I think interior D-line in the entirety of the draft becomes an opportunity. So in general, I'm thinking, and then edge, I mean, goodness gracious, there's so many glaring opportunities for improvement on this defense. I think edge, obviously, an area as well where if that type of position falls to the Bengals with some value, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go there. You lose Trey Hendrickson, one of the best finishers, sackers in the game. You replace him with Boye Mafe. Maybe lives up to early Hendrickson, but just pure sack numbers, not there compared to what Hendrickson can bring. You're really banking on Shamar Stewart having a year 2 breakout, and that makes me nervous because Stewart had some moments, but not quite the breakout in year number 1. So I'm going to just gesture broadly at the defense. If the Bengals pick a solid defensive prospect, I'm going to be happy in the 2026 NFL draft. So let's talk about what could be the best case scenario for the Bengals. I think generally at pick number 1, Fernando Mendoza is going to be going to the Raiders. That's genuinely a lock here. Similar headlines to what we saw with Burrow already in Las Vegas, learning the playbook. So I think pick 1, Mendoza going to the Raiders. This would suck, but it's sort of likely. I mean, best case scenario is all of these defensive targets are still on the board, but let's be realistic here. Arvell Reese likely going to the Jets, or if not the Jets, early in this draft. Maui Goa, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, offensive tackle to the Cardinals at 3. Jeremiah Love to the Titans at 4. It would stink, but Sonny Styles to the Giants at 5. We mentioned that in our last episode. I think that's a potential. Carnell Tate to the Browns. They need some help everywhere, the Browns do, but definitely need some offensive help as well. Reuben Bain Jr. to the Commanders at 7. Saints going not defense, or not cornerback, not Delane, not McCoy, maybe going wide receiver somewhere else. Just avoiding cornerback for the Saints at pick 8. And then the Chiefs going something like David Bailey at edge. Could end up being close to best case scenario. Ish. Right? I'm trying to be realistic. I mean, best case scenario is you can pick between Styles, Bain, Bailey, Downs, Delane, McCoy, right? But if that plays out that way, the Bengals would have the choice between Jermad McCoy, Mansour Delane, Caleb Downs. I am thrilled as a Bengals fan if I get any of those 3. In this scenario, God, maybe I take Downs. Maybe I'm rethinking my best case scenario. I really want a linebacker prospect to be around. Maybe Chiefs take Downs instead of... No, but that's not best case scenario. You see how difficult this gets. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the Commanders need cornerbacks. Maybe the Commanders take one of the cornerbacks instead of Bain, and that would leave Downs one of the 2 cornerbacks, and Bain. Maybe that's best case scenario. I would rather the choice be difficult at 10 than it's obvious because there's nobody left. So maybe I would tweak best case scenario, but in this instance, the 2 cornerbacks and Downs. God, McCoy looked really good, didn't he, in that tape? There's some good linebackers in round 2, so I'm not hating how this played out. Maybe I go Downs here. Downs is just the type who can transform a defense, and I'm not sad about it if I'm getting Caleb Downs. So that type of scenario leaves some flexibility. Again, there's some picks in there. I imagine one of those guys will be gone. Another one will be available. There's some options here for the Bengals at pick 10 that are starting to unfold. Based on how different pro days and things have gone. Let's talk quickly about worst case scenario. Again, Mendoza, number 1. Sonny Styles to the Jets at number 2 would stink. Maui Goa to the Cardinals. Again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. Love, Mansour Delane, gone. Reuben Bain, gone to the Giants and the Browns back-to-back. Arvell Reese, gone. Jermad McCoy to the Saints, gone. Caleb Downs to the Chiefs, gone. That would leave Carnell Tate, David Bailey, Maui Goa, offensive tackle, meaning Styles, Delane, Bain, McCoy, Downs, gone at 2, 5, 6, 8, and 9. I would be okay with David Bailey. I could see the Bengals going Maui Goa in this situation. Offensive tackle, I know the Bengals need a lot of help on the defensive side. The Bengals don't really have a swing tackle right now. We've got our starters on the offensive line, and that's it, unless you want to watch Cody Ford rotate in. Yeah, so maybe worst case scenario is when you're debating between David Bailey and an offensive tackle at pick 10. And I think, based on the headline below, I think in a situation like this, you take a deep breath, you see if you can trade back a few picks. Maybe someone is in love with Tate, Bailey, one of the offensive tackles, and you can maybe add something back in one of those middle rounds and swoop someone up a bit later on. Notice how Peter Woods not being mentioned much in these first 10. I think some concerns around him, despite being talked about as a top 10 pick a few weeks ago, I think it'd be sweet if you somehow snag that as a round 2, a day 2 target for the Bengals. I think worst case scenario would be essentially every Bengals defensive target, and it could happen. Styles to the Jets, Delane to the Giants, Bain to the Browns, McCoy to the Saints, Downs to the Chiefs. God, imagine Reuben Bain paired with Myles Garrett. That would be painful to go up against. Joe Burrow would be crying somewhere. So let's talk a little bit about just the general broad consensus. You look at ESPN, CBS, Pro Football Focus, NFL.com, Bengals beat writers. What seems to be the most likely scenario? And I think this is one where Bengals fans actually should be okay. Again, Mendoza to the Raiders, number 1. Arvell Reese to the Jets at number 2. Maligoa to the Cardinals, number 3. Love to the Titans at number 4. Sonny Styles gone. That would stink. I love that pick. Browns getting Carnell Tate. Reuben Bain to the Commanders at 7. Delane to the Saints at 8. And David Bailey to the Chiefs at 9. This scenario, which again is sort of broadly combining a bunch of consensus, leaves Jermod McCoy and Caleb Downs to the Bengals. I think that's fine. It's what we talked about with best case scenario, one of the 2 cornerbacks in Downs. This is now most likely. Having to debate between adding a stud safety and a stud cornerback who can potentially save you from contract disputes in the next year is genuinely a win. I would love for that decision to be between a linebacker and edge and a safety, or a linebacker and edge and a cornerback. I really want some D-line or some defensive, the middle of the defense linebacker options at pick 10. I want that to be what the Bengals are worried about. But in the event you're getting secondary help, whether it's safety or cornerback, and the Bengals stay put, I'm feeling okay with the general current consensus between Jermod McCoy and Downs. Sitting out a year with health issues scares me. But what I've seen of McCoy on tape has been awesome. If healthy, which by pro day numbers looks like he is, could be an amazing pick for the Bengals at 10. And then, of course, Caleb Downs. We have talked about that plenty. People around the Bengals verse have talked about that plenty as well. This just makes draft season so exciting. There's so many things that could play out. Best case scenarios, worst case scenarios. The reality is it's going to be some mix of all of these. In general, I think there are enough teams that need different things in those first 10. A couple teams needing wide receiver help, a couple teams needing offensive line help. What really stinks is there's not a quarterback run. It's really just Mendoza. And in any other year where it's a strong quarterback class, you're sitting pretty, you're kicking back. The first 3 picks are all QBs. But you never know. There's been some discourse around Simpson out of Alabama. Maybe a team makes a reach for that pick early on. It's not going to be the Raiders. We know the Raiders are going Mendoza. But draft night always has a little drama. Maybe the Bengals trade back. Can the Bengals somehow snag Woods in round 2 out of Clemson and get one of these defensive secondary guys in round 1? I'm loving that. There's some good linebacker prospects. This is a good linebacker draft, remember. I want one of these studs in round 1, but this is a pretty strong linebacker class in rounds 2 and 3, whereas last year the Bengals reached for 2 linebackers in rounds 2 and 4 when, it just wasn't as strong of a class, and the classes were stronger elsewhere. So I think some options for the Cincinnati Bengals at pick number 10 in the 2026 NFL Draft just around the corner. We're going to be talking a lot about potential prospects. We're going to break down many of the options for the Cincinnati Bengals this week, and hopefully some drama from somewhere in the league, because, man, do I love some football. All that and more coming up this week on Bengals Daily, part of the Fan Arch Podcast Network. I've been Dave Olson. Talk to you next time.